Redemption 2 video, we're going to be talking about the secret life of Arthur Morgan that you just don't know about. So if you were just to play through the main campaign of Red Dead Redemption 2, you would actually miss a lot of details on our main protagonist, Arthur Morgan. And we're going to be talking about a lot of those things we missed today. Now, the first part of this video is going to be sort of a spoilerless version, and then towards the end, where I'll actually say like spoilers are about to happen, we're going to talk about some of the spoilers in game. So the first thing that was actually revealed about Arthur that you might not have known about was that he actually had a son. So you actually get this conversation if you do a bonus mission with Rain Falls. You actually have to help him out here, and on one of your rides you can actually have some dialogue with him, and Arthur actually talks about his son. So Arthur's son's name was Isaac, and his son was actually born to a waitress that Arthur met. And Arthur was a part of the gang, so he never really grew up as his son's father, but he would often visit them every so often until one day something bad happened. He actually arrived to find two graves outside the house. His son and his, I don't know if he had a wife at the time, but the mother of his son, they were killed in a robbery over $10, adding yet another layer of tragedy to Arthur's life. I'll let you guys take a listen to that conversation right now.
You know, I had a son once, years ago. Don't talk about him much.
Oh, what was his name?
Isaac. His mother, Eliza, was a waitress I met. When she got pregnant, she knew who I was, what my life was. I didn't want to promise nothing I couldn't keep, but I said I'd do right by them. Every few months, I'd stop by there for a few days. He was such a good kid. She was too, I guess. Just a kid, 19.
What happened?
I got there one day and saw two crosses outside. I knew right away. Turned out some bastards had come through. Robbed them. Shot them dead. And offered $10. It hardened me, feeling that kind of pain. But I know now that you don't get to live a bad life and have good things happen to you.
I think you're being hard on yourself.
Maybe. All I can do now is try and make some things right.
Now, Arthur's son and the loss of his son's mother might explain why Arthur does not sleep with people or engage in romance over the course of the game. Even characters like Mary Beth, who show explicit interest in him and is in a perceived safe environment to have a family, does not spur Arthur's interest, simply because he does not want the world to have another Isaac. More specifically, Arthur does not want the world to force another Isaac to suffer. Isaac was a boy he could not raise, born to a mother he could not be with, and for all the good he did for his family, he couldn't be there when it mattered the most, and he lost the son he cared so deeply for, and Arthur will never take that risk again. So that's a reason why you actually don't see him have any romance interest throughout the game. With one exception, and that's what we're going to be talking about next, his long-lost love, Mary Linton. So Mary Linton is a side character that you can run into, and it's actually revealed that Arthur and Mary used to have a relationship a long time ago. And it was actually revealed at the very least they were engaged. However, due to his life as an outlaw, Mary's family, specifically her father, disapproved of him, ultimately forcing a wedge in their relationship. Mary ended up leaving Arthur, and Arthur never found love again. But throughout the game, they actually have moments of intimacy, and there's actually times where Arthur was considering leaving the gang. In fact, there's sort of a turning point in the series. If it wasn't for the accident on Guarma, Arthur would have left the gang. So you'll know that Arthur actually agreed to leave the gang and be with Mary Linton following the bank heist. Now, had the heist not gone sour, Arthur would have taken his money, abandoned Dutch, and finally ran away with Mary to start their lives. Unfortunately, as you guys know, the bank's aftermath immediately leads into the shipwreck, which causes Arthur to be stranded on Guarma for an unspecified amount of time. And by the time he reaches land, he receives a letter Mary left saying that she has given up waiting for him to change. And Arthur had truly changed and was genuinely planning to leave once and for all. So it's sort of a sad story that this never really ended up working out. Another thing you might not know about Arthur is he is a talented writer. So his journal is more than a narrative tool used as a means of characterization. You can actually read it upon opening your satchel, and if you flip through the pages, you'll come to the quick realization that Arthur is actually quite a talented writer, putting a good deal of emphasis on his craft. And Arthur's style takes on a very introspective, almost existential tone. He perfectly conveys how at odds he is with Dutch's descent into madness and is able to convey emotion incredibly well. Now, his sentences might be fragmented, but they're done so deliberately to prove a point. Arthur really knows how to write, and that's something that's impressive given the fact that he never probably had proper schooling and the time that he ended up growing up in. Moving on, did you know that Arthur actually has a spirit animal? So during these ethereal visions that you see throughout the game, you have either seen a wolf or a stag, and that all depends on the type of person you were. If you were a good character throughout the game, you would see the stag. If you were a bad character, you would ultimately see the wolf. Up next, Hosea was Arthur's true father figure. So even though the story pushes the idea of Dutch as Arthur's true father figure, it's quite obvious that Arthur takes after Hosea more than he does Dutch. And while he does ride with Dutch and act as his right-hand man, Hosea's influence can clearly be seen on Arthur as a person. He has a certain wisdom that feels like with Hosea. And not just that, there's a sensitivity to Arthur that he keeps tucked away in his journal. And although it's stated that Dutch actually taught Arthur to read, Hosea was likely the one who taught Arthur to refine his craft. And Hosea is clearly the smartest member of the gang, keeping everyone in line, and you can see this resemblance throughout the game. Speaking of father figures, it was actually revealed that Arthur's father was a monster. So unlike John Marston, who barely knew his father, Arthur did live quite a few years with his biological father. Now, while this is a subject he keeps relatively hush about for most of the game, a few moments in the first 6 chapters do reveal key tidbits about Arthur's father, specifically his wicked ways. The recurring element circling Arthur's father is how much they did not get along. And while he looks back on his mother fondly, he states that his father lived far too long beyond anyone's goodwill. Now, he does keep a portrait of his father beside his bed. Granted, it's a picture of his mugshot, and it was actually revealed that Arthur's father would actually beat him when he was young. So you can kind of imagine why Arthur wanted to get away from that situation. Another thing that's revealed through camp dialogue is Arthur is roughly 35 years old by the time of chapter 2, and other in-game dialogue suggests that Arthur was 15 when he joined the gang. So basically, he's been with the group for 20 plus years. Now, we're going to get on to some spoilers, so if you have not completed the game, this is something you might want to come back to, but let's dive into the spoilers right now. So something that's kind of interesting is Arthur's fate was actually sealed by Chapter 2. So in Chapter 2, you do a mission called Money Lending and Other Sins, and you have to collect a debt from a man named Thomas Downs. And you actually start beating up Thomas Downs during this process, and because of that, he ends up coughing on you a couple of times. And it turns out that Thomas Downs actually died of tuberculosis, and he gave tuberculosis to Arthur. His symptoms didn't start showing up for a couple of chapters later, but it's kind of interesting. If you caught on to that, you would already know that Arthur's fate was sealed at the start of Chapter 2, and that he wasn't going to make it.
You borrowed money from my business partner, Herr Strauss. You owe him, you took the money. He wants it back, what's not to understand? Where's our money?
I don't have it.
Sell your place.
We already owe more than it's worth.
Then sell your wife, or your family, or something. We ain't your idea of charity. Is that clear?
Thomas!
What are you looking at?
Thomas!
I said what you looking at, woman.
My husband isn't well. If we could just have more...
Like I said, we ain't nobody's idea of charity. Get us the money.
Up next, Arthur adores his horse. So he has an incredibly strong bond with his horse, and there's no better example of this than the final mission of Chapter 6. Arthur's horse actually gets shot, and the horse is not going to survive the shooting, which prompts Arthur to sit back with his horse in a moment of legitimate danger, and he comforts it to its grave. It's probably the most powerful moment in the game, in fact, more so than Arthur's fate itself, and I believe it solidifies the man Arthur is, as deep down, truly a good person. And the final thing we're going to be talking about today is everything that Arthur did in the game was for nothing. And that might be the greatest tragedy of Red Dead Redemption 2, is how little he actually changed the course of history. Dutch still got away. He never truly put a stop to Micah's reign. John escaped, but not for long, and Jack never grew up to be the man Arthur knew he could be. And when it's all said and done, the game's epilogue is pretty cool. John still had to put down Dutch, who lost his mind even further, but he still becomes executed by Edgar Ross for a redemption he did indeed achieve, and then Jack has to throw his life away to avenge a father who never wanted to be avenged. So even though Arthur's story was incredible, he never really changed anything, and that might be the saddest part of the whole bit. But anyways, that right there is the secret life of Arthur Morgan that you might not have known about. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What do you think of the life and story of Arthur Morgan? Let me know your thoughts, opinions, and more down there.